Today's date is March 2nd, 2025. We are having a Israeli Palestinian simulation with Paul Rogers. And we are speaking about a federal government that will be created for the people of Israel and Palestine, a common secular government based on a constitution, based on equality, with a parliament that would be equal to the people of Palestine and Israel, with an executive branch that would be Palestinian and Israeli president and vice president, and a judicial branch, all separate and independent of the Israeli and the Palestinian government, that would be created whether or not the Israeli or the Palestinian governments oppose it or approve of it, independently of the Israeli and the Palestinian government. You can go to our website at ipconfederation.org and read the Constitution. It's available in English, Arabic, and Hebrew. And if you go to the Constitution, you will see the full Constitution. We will be speaking about the Constitution today. If you click on Constitution, you'll read the preamble. You'll read that the federal government is created of three branches: legislative branch with 300 parliament members, executive branch with president and vice president, and a judicial branch, all based on equality between the Palestinians and the Israelis. My name is Joseph Avasar, and you can reach me at josephavassar@gmail.com. We are speaking about the area of Israel, Palestine, which has the most dangerous ideology created by men, that was merged with the most dangerous weapons created by men. That area of Israel, Palestine, currently has a dangerous ideology merging with dangerous weapons, all of them created by men. By that I mean is there is no natural disasters to speak of in that area. There is no wind, there is no fires, no earthquakes. All of the killing that are going on over there are a result of humans who created dangerous ideologies, and they combined them with dangerous weapons, ostensibly to give peace and security, but in reality created the most dangerous area, one of that lasted now in over 100 years in the Middle East. And we believe that these dangerous ideologies and using the dangerous weapons need to stop. Our guest today is Paul Rogers. Paul Rogers is an emeritus professor of peace studies at Bradford University and an honorary fellow of the Joint Service Command and Staff College, JSCSC. He has lectured regularly at senior UK defense colleges for almost 40 years and has been an external examiner for the MA programs at the Royal College of Defense Studies at JSCSC. Paul lectures on changing drivers of international conflict with interests in the Middle East and parliamentary violence, and also has a long-term research interest in the interaction between socioeconomic marginalization, climate disruption, and security. Paul was educated at Imperial College and then lectured there, including a 2-year secondment as a senior scientific office with the East African community. He joined peace studies at Bradford in 1979 and has maintained a close connection with the university since then, including periods as head of departments and chair of faculty. Paul has also been chair of the British International Studies Association. Paul has written and edited 30 books and over 150 papers and book chapters, including Losing Control, Global Security in the 21st Century, that was published in London by Pluto on 2010, and Irregular War, New Threats from the Margins, published in London by Bloomsbury, I.B. Turris in 2017. His most recent publication, The Triple Paradigm Crisis, Economy, Environment, and Security, will be published in the Journal of Global Fault Lines in 2020. His work has been published in many languages, including Russian, Chinese, Japanese, Farsi, Polish, Portuguese, Spanish, and Catalan. In 2017, he was invited by Springer Nature to contribute a selection of his writings over the past 50 years to their Pioneer series, which was published in 2019 under the title Paul Rogers, a Pioneer in Critical Security Analysis and Public Engagement. Series editor, Professor Hans Gunther Brauch. Paul is a regular broadcaster on radio and TV network worldwide, averaging at least 150 interviews a year for more than 30 years. He also writes a weekly column on international affairs for Open Democracy and a monthly analysis on international security issues for the Oxford Research Group. We will have a simulation with Mati Shmuelov, an Arab Jewish poet, an author and journalist living in Berlin, on March 16, 2025. On March 30th, we will have a simulation with Ron Chen Morris, an associate professor in the history department of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And on April 13, 2025, we will have simulation with Professor Smadar Ben Natan, a legal scholar of human rights, criminal justice, and armed conflict, an expert on Israel Palestine. Wanted to show you the two ads that we had, one in the Washington Post and one in the New York Times that was published. Thanks so much to your generosity, allowing us to put the world on notice that there is a way to make peace by creating a federal government. And what better way to do it is to tell the people in Washington and in the United States that there is a way to do it, because they believe and swear allegiance to a federal government on a regular basis. Join our meetup group. Nasir will put a link if you want to join our meetup group, and hopefully we will be able to create chapters in other cities. We are going to start this week a $10,000 This Land is Your Land song competition. I am happy to tell you that we were able to get the license for that song from Woody Guthrie, from the company that owned the song, Woody Guthrie's song, This Land is Your Land and This Land is My Land. They allowed us to change the wording to make it applicable to Israel Palestine. We need you to be volunteers to help us publicize the competition. The competition will last a whole year, and we will publish the songs regularly. And hopefully by December 31st, when the competition will be over, 31 days afterwards, we will announce who the winner is, who will receive $10,000 from our organization. So we need your help to publicize the event, to tell the media about it, and to contact musicians who will perform this song and send it to us on YouTube. The PowerPoint stuck. So. We are demonstrating how a federal government would function, how it would thread the needle, meaning how it would pass legislation that would be accepted, or better to say that the Israeli and the Palestinian government will not be able to reject, because if they reject it, they will expose themselves as governments who do not want peace, governments that are against their own people. They are governments against their own people, but a federal government that passing legislation benefiting the people of Israel Palestine will expose those governments, even though we are not asking to dismantle them. But we are certainly looking to expose them. We are asking you to participate in the simulation. This is not a lecture, this is a simulation. We're asking you to ask questions. We encourage questions. And if you put your questions on the chat, Nasir will translate, or will relay those questions to us, and will translate your comments to a question. But try to be helpful. Wait until the end to understand the concept of a federal government the way we are proposing it. This is a short movie that explains what our proposal is all about. It's 2 minutes.
The conflict between Israelis and Palestinians has endured for generations. And instead of time healing the wounds, it's only caused the anger to fester and the violence to grow. But what if there was a way to alleviate the tension? Something that may not outright solve every problem, but at least create a forum that encourages a peaceful compromise. Welcome to the Israeli Palestinian Confederation, a common third government between the Israeli and Palestinian citizens, specifically designed to foster peace, tolerance, and economic prosperity between the two nations. Here's how it works. First off, both Israel and Palestine will keep their respective governments. Israel's Knesset and the Palestinian National Authority will remain unchanged. The Israeli Palestinian Confederation, IPC, will be a third entity acting as a unifying agent between the two. The IPC will comprise 300 parliament members elected from 300 districts in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. Above them will preside a president and vice president, one Israeli and one Palestinian. In order for the IPC to pass a law, it will require a 55% majority from its Israeli representatives, as well as a 55% majority from its Palestinian representatives, thereby preventing either side from monopolizing the legislature. Of course, the IPC won't undermine the political power of either the Israeli or the Palestinian government. At any time, Israel or Palestine may veto a law passed by the IPC. If neither side vetoes, the law is passed. And the two nations are another step closer to resolution. Please help us make this a reality. The Israeli Palestinian Confederation. We might speak different languages, but we all mean the same thing.
So we are actually going to simulate what we just saw in the movie. Let's take a survey, which we will compare to another survey at the end of the simulation. asking all of you participants right now, do you support a common federal government for the people of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza? Please vote yes or no. And we will compare that vote to another vote at the end of the simulation.
I need to see the voting sheet, Dan. I don't see a voting sheet.
Are you using a phone, Olivia?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, that
Well, you
could
can
be
just
it.
put
That could be
yes.
the reason.
No, I usually do. No, I usually do. I always do. Just put yes. Do you support her? Yes. For me,
Okay.
okay?
All
Thanks,
right.
Joe. Thanks, Joseph.
I also don't see it, and I'm using a phone, which I use every single time.
How are you voting? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we have, okay, that's weird because it says here 19 out of 21. So we actually appears to have 21 out of 21. So some people are not voting. But right now it's 90% yes, 19 out of 21. And 2 out of 21 are voting no, 10%. Hopefully we will be able to change your mind. I'm not sure how to repair the problem that it's not appearing on your phone. And I'm not sure we will be able to do it as we speak. It may be a Zoom problem. All right, we'll compare this vote to the vote that will be done at the end of the simulation. All right. So we are defining a federal government and a confederation government at the exact same way. And the definition is based on the Constitution. Some governments refer to themselves as federal governments, while others use the term confederation. Definitions are not fixed and evolve with changing realities. And we define both of these terms based on the Constitution that is on our website. This is the heart of the simulation. And the heart is that we are making assumptions. From now on, we are going to be acting in a simulation mode, and you will have to accept those assumptions that we are presenting. The first assumption is that we are able to obtain substantial amount of funding to make the people of Israel and Palestine aware of an election, to create the election platform that would give them an opportunity to vote 3 months, not 1 day, but 3 months to vote, that would encourage people to run in their area, in their parliament area, out of the in one of the 300 parliamentary districts. It will encourage people to run for president and vice president. So you will have to make the assumption that we were able to obtain all of that funding. You will also have to make the assumption for this simulation that we gave 14 million people, with the exclusion of children, 14 million people in the area that is Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza, the opportunity to vote. They will be able to vote for their parliament member in their district, and they will be able to vote for their for the president and vice president. That's a nationwide vote. So each person will be able to vote twice, once for the parliament member and once for the president. Whoever gets the most votes for president, whether he's Israeli or Palestinian, will be the first president. Whoever gets the second number of votes of the other nationality will be vice president, and they will rotate in 2 years. For the purpose of this simulation, you will have to assume that me, Joseph, was elected as president. I never intend to run for president. I am not even qualified under the Constitution because I do not reside in Israel, Palestine. But for the purpose of the simulation, please make that assumption that I was elected. we are conducting a simulation. From now on, I'm going to simulate as if I was elected as president. You will also have to assume the 300 parliament members in 300 districts were elected. I will ask all of you to act as parliament members, either Israeli or Palestinian, and you will have to, once you are a parliament member, you will have to assume the responsibility for your district. Your district could be Israeli district, could be Palestinian district, or could be a mixed district. So before I go to Paul and ask him to ask questions, his questions or make comments, I want to ask you, the audience, do you have any questions regarding these assumptions? Please ask your questions. Okay, I hear no questions. Nasir, do we have any questions on the chat? All right, let's go then to Paul Rogers. Paul, do you have any questions or comments regarding these assumptions?
Thank you very much, Joseph. I think it would be comments rather than questions. The issue is that if we are doing this simulation, given the current state of attitudes and opinions within Israel and Palestine, then obviously it will be very difficult to persuade the governments of either side to participate. We're making the assumption that it has been done, which is against the odds in terms of where we are now, but we make that assumption. But the problem is, if we were to make the assumption that people are willing to cooperate, the people who voted, then that is a huge assumption given where we are actually at. And I think the problem is that we're in a position where, I'll use the term sides, but both sides, on the Israeli and Palestinian side, there is deep mistrust of the other. It used to be very much on the Palestinian side, but since the 7th of October, it is very strong on the Israeli side as well, if you like, the Jewish side. And so I think we have an issue from the start in terms of how one runs the assimilation itself. If we're running it in terms of we're assuming that in fact there is much more a sort of peace and welfare outlook, then that is one thing, but it becomes an unrealistic assumption, an unrealistic, really the whole issue is difficult. So I'd really be interested in how we're looking at it from now on. I accept the idea of running a simulation, but to what extent are we going to try and keep the simulation realistic in terms of what we believe people are actually thinking on both sides?
You mentioned something at the beginning of your remarks about the Israeli and the Palestinian governments accepting this. That's not part of the simulation. They don't have to accept it.
Well, put it this way, when I say accept, if the simulation assumes that it has been possible to run elections for the new confederation, then that does mean that any of the existing authorities, whether the limited ones on the Palestinian side, the rather more general ones on the Israeli side, are willing to go that far. Are we not making that assumption at all?
No, the assumptions do not require, we're not assuming that the Israeli or the Palestinian governments go along with this or in opposition to this. Are you saying that it is necessary to get their agreement to run these elections?
No, it's more a case that if there were to be elections, they could not exist without the approval of the relevant authorities at the present time. And there is a huge asymmetry between the power of those authorities. The Palestinian National Authority has rather limited power over one part of the occupied West Bank, whereas Israel has a degree of power over the entire territory from the road to the sea. But what I'm saying essentially is that if we're in this position of running it as a simulation, and we're really forgetting the possibility that it is not actually possible to run a simulation, to actually do the real thing in real life, then it is a little bit problematic. So really, I suppose the link to that is if we make that assumption that it has been possible to do it, do we proceed now on the basis of what we believe and know is the current state of attitudes in both the Israeli and Palestinian controlled parts of, if I use the phrase, Greater Israel? That's what I'm interested in knowing, in a sense.
Paul, I agree with you. There is asymmetry between the Israeli and the Palestinian government. There is no question about it. But the asymmetry is not really relevant here because we are speaking about the whole area as one unit, not based on Israeli government or Palestinian government. In fact, you could assume that both of them will object to the election. What we believe is that because the elections will take place online, it would be very difficult for the Israeli and the Palestinian governments to prevent the election. When democracy was introduced, we had kings and emperors, and when the idea of election was brought about, people said, well, the king or the emperor will oppose this, and they were right. But nevertheless, they were able to run an election despite the opposition of the king or the emperor.
Well, in many cases, I think that was really only made possible by violence or the threat of violence. But I take your point. I suppose if we're looking at something which is run through the net, through the web, then obviously the web can be under very substantial control by either side. But in a sense, if we want to assume that this has been done successfully and that we are able to run this series of elections and the results are as we have on the board now, then the second issue, I think, which is an important one, are we assuming that attitudes in real life at the present time are as they are, or are we assuming that in fact things are rather better and more equitable in terms of positions than is actually the case? In other words, we're accepting this assumption that we have a confederation established, but are we also under the belief that in fact, because so many people have voted for it, there is a greater chance of them coming together than there actually is in real life? Because I think at the moment, you have such very high levels of suspicion on both sides that it's going to be difficult to really to bring that within an assimilation, which really helps us make progress.
We are assuming, at least I am assuming, that the attitude of the Israelis and the Palestinians is as it is right now.
Right.
Actually, in my opinion, because of the attitude and because of the failure of the Israeli and the Palestinian governments to give peace, and because of the internal mistrust that Israelis have with their governments, with their system, and for that matter, the Palestinians' mistrust of their governments and their system, the introduction of a federal government would make much more sense to them if it is presented to them in a fair way. In other words, they gave up, many Israelis and many Palestinians, and gave up on the idea of Zionist or Palestinian exclusivity. They are truly interested in having normal life. And if we present a formula that makes sense to them, I think that giving the attitude that they have right now, we are in fact very likely to get the results that that is on the board, which is 5 million people voting.
Well, I don't share your optimism, but I share the validity of trying to see it that way and to do it that way. And it may well be the case. I would have said that maybe 2 years ago, there might have been more a greater possibility of seeing progress in the way that you suggest. I think we're in a rather different position now. On the Israeli side, when I talk to Israeli friends and look at what is being said in the Israeli media, what I see is much greater suspicion and a sense of very considerable insecurity. I think people from outside tend to think that there's one particular phrase which is relevant here, that because of historical circumstances, Israel is a country which, in a sense, is impregnable in its insecurity. It is insecure mainly because of the conflict between two peoples over one part of land. It's impregnable because it feels it has to be. But the real problem, I think, with 7th of October is that impregnability has been, in a sense, punctured. And I think that has led to deeper unease and concern on the part of very many Israelis. And I think if you look back over the last, 40 or 50 years, there have been times when Israelis have reacted to major setbacks by being more secure, more concerned about their own security. And that seems to me to be extremely heightened at present. On the Palestinian side at the moment, insofar as one can look more generally, and we're talking about Palestinians, those who are still in Gaza, within Israel, of course, itself, over 2 million people, 3 million people in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and the few on the Golan Heights. When you look at all those together, I think the level of distrust is huge simply because of what has happened in Gaza. It isn't that they are in any way supportive of the 7th of October. As far as I can see, very few Palestinians really are supportive of that in terms of what has happened since. I think the problem is that the destruction of Gaza has been so extraordinary that that has knocked back massively any belief on the part of, I suspect, the majority, possibly the great majority of Palestinians, that there's any chance of any kind of lasting, secure peace with Israel. Now, that may be wrong, but I think that is probably where we are coming from at the present time. And so we're really looking at, as I say, a simulated confederation which has been established, having to operate in extraordinarily difficult times. And in a sense, I think we have to take on that on board within the assimilation itself.
All right. So this is the area we are speaking about. I'm asking the audience to now choose whether you are acting as Israeli parliament member or Palestinian parliament members. So just keep in mind the geographic location that you chose and whether that area is strictly Palestinian or strictly Israeli or mixed. By that, I mean the population. So please make your choice right now and stay intellectually honest, representing your district wherever you choose it to be. So please make, and Paul, you can make your choice as well if you want. All right, so 5 more seconds to make a choice. We have, please publish the results. Share the results. Okay, we have 8 out of 19 Palestinians, 42%. And we have 11 out of 19 Israeli. I think this is the first time we have more Israeli parliament members than Palestinians, but okay. So please remain intellectually honest and continue to and decide what area you represent, because you may be asked when the vote takes place. Also, we need to have an Israeli prime minister who will have a veto power. He's not part of our government, but he will have a veto power. And I called Jeff Warner ahead of time, and I know, Jeff, you are here. Jeff, can you just say hi?
Hi.
So hello, thank you. And I need a volunteer to be a Palestinian parliament member. I'm sorry, a Palestinian president. Do we have someone who is willing to be the Palestinian president?
I can be it.
Okay,
It's John here.
okay, terrific. All right, so now it's clear we have a president, I'm the president, we have parliament members, we have a different government, Israeli and Palestinian governments, and we have the heads of their government in the simulation. All right. Our first order of business is to ratify the Constitution. This is a short version of the long Constitution, and our parliament members will need to ratify the Constitution. Libby, would you be so kind as to read the Constitution? All right, let me read it. We believe that Palestinians and Israelis are entitled to equal rights under the law and guaranteed human rights and freedom. The Israeli Palestinian Confederation does not intend to supersede or supplant the Palestinian or Israeli government, nor to abrogate or undermine any agreements between those governments. We recognize the need to work with the Israeli and Palestinian governments. Our purpose is to resolve conflicts and to expand the relationship between Palestinians and Israelis in a fair and equitable manner. We believe in equal rights under the law, guaranteed human rights, and freedom for all. We voluntarily give the legislators and the governments of Israel and Palestine veto power over legislation we pass relating to the domain of control of those governments. We believe in the separation of power between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. We believe in the creation of a permanent secular government for all the people residing in Israel and Palestine. We believe in having a separate judicial branch relating to IPC legislation with Israeli and Palestinian judges with a system to avoid biased decision based on nationality. So the main thing is we recognize the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. They can agree to whatever they want constitutionally. We are obliged to accept whatever agreements they have between them. That includes if they choose to create two-state or one-state or whatever agreement. Constitutionally, we are required to accept any agreements between those two governments. And the other thing is that if we pass legislation that violates the sovereignty of the government of Palestine or Israel, we give them a veto power. Does anyone have a question regarding the Constitution? Please ask the question. I hear no questions. Let's go to Paul. Paul, do you have any questions or comments regarding the Constitution?
Well, in terms of assimilation, what would be of interest to me would be to what extent does anybody who is voting in this election to establish this constitution has to believe in the terms of the constitution? Or would they be in a position to vote disagreeing with it, in a sense, to play a devil's advocate, if you like?
No. No, you cannot be part of the federal government unless you pledge allegiance and totally accept the Constitution. If you do not ratify the Constitution, you will be expelled from the parliament.
Right.
This parliament requires every person to vote to ratify the Constitution. And
Right.
not only that, also to terminate their loyalty or to any other government, including the Israeli or the Palestinian government.
And on the basis of that, you're assuming that 5 million people would vote in favor of this constitution?
No, I'm assuming that 300 parliament members would vote to ratify the Constitution.
I see. Right.
Yeah, I think what needs to be specified is the election takes place beforehand, and after that there'll be the first assembly, the first parliament will be a sort of constituent assembly which prepares a constitution and ratifies it.
All right, let's take a vote. Palestinian parliament members, please ratify the Constitution. Please remember that if you do not ratify the Constitution, you are expelled from the parliament. And the person who received the second number of votes in your district will be elected as parliament member in that district. Palestinian parliament members, please ratify the Constitution. We need one more vote. Okay, publish the votes. 100% of the Palestinian parliament members voted in favor of the Constitution. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Please vote to ratify the Constitution. Israeli parliament members. Remember, if you vote no, you are expelled. You are not part of you still can vote in the general election, but you cannot be part of the parliament. That's the same with any other democracy around the world. The parliament or the Congress or senators have to accept the Constitution. Publish the vote. Okay, we have 88% voted yes, 1 person voted no. That person is expelled from the parliament, and you are not allowed to vote in any legislation. And the person who received the second number of votes in your district will be elected as parliament member. So,
could I come in at that? Could I come in at that minute?
Sure.
I'm the one who voted no. Because I thought that would probably be realistic and that you would get that. It also means that I'm more of an observer and a discussant from now on rather than trying to participate within it. I hope that's okay with you, but that seemed to be a sensible way to proceed.
That's fine. This is a simulation. It's okay.
Exactly. Fine. Yeah.
It's a good way to explain what's going on and how a parliament is created. And in all democracies that have a constitution, the people that are running for that democracy have to accept the Constitution, including this one. And by the way, Israel does not have a constitution. No. All right. So congratulations. We have a constitution. And this is a momentous occasion in the history of the Middle East. It has never been done before in the history of thousands of years of the Middle East. We never had a constitution that is based on a separation between government and religion for the entire people who reside in Israel, Palestine. The ratification of this constitution that we just took place undermines the existing government's use of fear and hate to justify their action. It removes the collective stigma against Israelis and Palestinians that we are not a democracy, that we are controlled by religion, and that we are unable to live in a democracy that separates between religion and government. It provides huge political capital to the parliament that was just elected and to the president, me as the president, because now I have a lot more legitimacy worldwide and in Israel and Palestine than the government of Israel and Palestine. It would compel the governments and organization to contribute to our success. When I say contribute, I mean financially and otherwise to contribute to our success. And it would give the Israelis and the Palestinians new self-image and proves that Israelis and Palestinians are not a monolithic society, that they can work together, that some Israelis and some Palestinians have the desire to work together and move forward in their lives. So thank you so much. This is a momentous occasion. Remember, this is a simulation. Now we are simulating as if we are actually in real life. All right. First order of business is granting a veto power to the separate government. Is Libby or Charles here? All right, let me read the legislation. Now we have a parliament, we have a constitution. Let's go on to the first order of business, and that's a legislation. The Confederation is the government of the entire population of Israel and Palestine from the river to the sea. We recognize the Palestinian and Israeli governments and are seeking their cooperation to implement our vision for peace by giving them a veto. We will do our utmost to satisfy the essential needs of each government. We are pleading with the Palestinian and Israeli public to understand that while we would like to pass the best legislation possible to improve their lives, under these constraints, a perfect legislation is not possible. The constraints are really the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. We hereby bestow a veto power relating to legislation affecting sovereignty to the following: the government of Israel on issues in which it is indispensable, the Palestinian governments on issues in which it is indispensable. In the event of changes in the entirety of the Israeli or Palestinian governments, this legislation may be amended or repealed subject to our Constitution. The Parliament will decide on indispensability. Vetoes may be bestowed individually or collectively, meaning bestowed individually to the Israeli or the Palestinian government, collectively or individually. So, what's the difference between dispensable and indispensable? If we pass legislation relating to the land itself, to police force and removal of the wall, then the governments are indispensable, and we will give them a veto power. But if we pass legislation regarding our budget or ratifying the Constitution or appointing ministers or judges, those governments are dispensable and they do not get a veto power. Why do we give them a veto power? Because it provides a safety net. That goes back to what Paul was saying, because of the suspicion and the hesitancy on both sides. The veto power gives them a safety net, so they understand that their governments can veto legislation that affects their sovereignty. It increases the likelihood of Israelis and Palestinian participation, both in the government and in the election. It decreases Israeli and Palestinian governments' opposition because they cannot claim that we are undermining their governments. In fact, we're giving them a veto power. It removes any claims that the IPC has subversive intentions, because we do not. We give a veto power to the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. Therefore, we cannot be labeled as subversive. It gives legal protection to the candidates because the Israeli and the Palestinian governments will not be able to prosecute them as trying to undermine those governments. It will compel the IPC to thread the needle, meaning it will compel us to pass legislation that we know that the Israeli and the Palestinian governments will not be able to veto, meaning thread the needle. And it will create a platform for negotiation with a deadline. Does anyone have any questions regarding this legislation granting a veto power? All right, hearing no questions, let's go to Paul. What are your comments regarding this legislation?
I would think under these circumstances, a veto power will be necessary. Whether it's at the level that you propose, I think is very difficult to say. But it seems to me that at the very early stage of trying to make any kind of progress at all, then there will be a certain belief that a veto power provides a sort of a backstop for people whose views may feel they are not actually accommodated by what is happening. So yes, I would agree that you would need a veto. At what level, I think it's more difficult to decide.
All right. Let's go to the Palestinian parliament members. Please vote on the veto power. Palestinian parliament members. The person who was expelled from the parliament cannot vote. Palestinian parliament members, please vote on the veto power. Do you agree to give a veto power to the Israeli and the Palestinian government on matters that violates their sovereignty? We need more votes. Please vote. Okay, publish the votes. 86% voted in favor of giving them a veto power. 86% of the Palestinian parliament members. Remember, we need 55%, so we exceeded that. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Please vote, Israeli parliament members. All right, publish the vote. We got 100% of those who voted in favor of those who voted for this legislation voting yes. We need 55%. We exceeded that by far. So we now agree to give a veto power to the Israeli and the Palestinian governments on matter in which they are indispensable. And we will decide whether they are indispensable or not. It's not going to be the Israeli or the Palestinian government. It's our government that decides whether they are dispensable or indispensable. Do I have a volunteer to read the first, to read our declaration of peace? All right, Giacomo, you want to read the Declaration of Peace?
Yes, okay. So the Declaration of Peace says, our goal is to be a shining example for peace and tolerance. We believe in the respect for all people, regardless of religion or gender. We're committed to protect all people of all religions and to value the sanctity of, this is covered by...
Of life.
Of life. All people are equal. All religions are equal. The practice of religion is voluntary and shall not be imposed. We respect the connections of all religions to the land, and no war shall be imposed on account of religion. We encourage all governments of the world to adopt this resolution.
All right, so we don't give a veto power to the Israeli or the Palestinian government, but we will ask them as part of this legislation whether they accept this legislation. Does anyone have any? So this is our government's declaration. Our parliament is making this declaration. Does anyone have any questions regarding this declaration of peace? Okay, before we take a vote, let's go to Paul. Paul, do you have any comments regarding this declaration of peace?
I think it's relevant, obviously, that this does include reference to religions and land, which would not be relevant in the case of most states, but is certainly relevant in the case of Israel and Palestine. In general terms, obviously, this is straightforward and in many ways very welcome declaration of peace, and one would expect it to pass given the nature of the system that you have. Whether it relates to what people actually believe of the close to 15 million people in the entire region, in the entire country, that's much more difficult to say. But as an aim, then obviously this is commendable.
All right. Does this declaration of peace enhances your acceptance or belief in the possibility or the necessity of having a federal government?
Well, I think this kind of, what this does to my mind is to actually have this as a possibility in any sense at all, opens up people to think more, particularly at a time when there have so huge difficulties and so much violence, particularly what is happening in the West Bank at present, which I think is going to set the scene, I'm afraid, for many months, if not years to come. So this kind of declaration, in other words, can pull people up from where they are now, and at least make more people think that you have to move in a radically different direction. So to that extent, I think it has the potential to be a peace-building measure. You
mentioned earlier that there is no trust between Israelis and Palestinians. And I agree with you, there is no trust. But the question I have for you is, does democracy rely on trust, or does democracy rely on transparency? What would you rather have? A government in which the people that are running the government trust each other, or would you rather have a system in which the system is transparent to the people that are running it and to the people that are being governed, meaning the general population?
I don't think it's one or the other. I think you have to have both. And in each case, obviously, they are different. There can be different degrees. Each one is a sort of a range of possibilities. But in broad sense, it seems to me that transparency, particularly when you have so much mistrust, is essential. but it is not, in other words, they go together. I don't think it's not a question of having one or the other. I think you've got to work towards having both, because one in part depends on the other.
But transparency brings trust. Trust, on the other hand, can destroy transparency. And I'll give you an example. The government of Israel was basically created based on trust, that we are all Jewish people, that we know we are going to do good because we are Jewish people. We're not going to create any policies that are contrary to the Jewish people. And that was created based on trust. But little by little, the people in the government realized that there is a lot of trust, and they can take advantage of the trust, and they removed the transparency aspect. On the other hand, if you have transparency not based on trust, then you are building up a mechanism of trust. So what I am saying, and I want to ask your opinion, isn't really transparency much more important than trust? Because transparency creates trust, but trust by itself that could destroy transparency.
It could. I certainly would accept that. But it seems to me they do go hand in glove to get a success. And if one or other gets unbalanced, then that can make problems for the whole situation.
All right, let's go to the Palestinian parliament members. Please vote on this declaration of peace. Palestinian parliament members. Okay, 5 more seconds to vote. Please publish the vote. 100% of those who vote, Palestinian parliament members who voted yes. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Israeli parliament members, please vote. Publish the vote. All of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor of this declaration of peace. Let's go to the Prime Minister of Israel. Mr. Prime Minister of Israel, are you accepting this declaration of peace?
The government of Israel strives for peace. And we, in fact, accept points 1, 2, 3, and the last point. However, the points we're talking about equality and the respect for the connection of religion to the land violates one of our basic, or goes against one of our basic laws, that the Jewish people have a right to settle anywhere in the land. And so the government of Israel will have a great deal of difficulty, although we subscribe to peace. The exact wording of this is difficult for our government.
All right, I just want to clarify that Jeff is representing what he believes is Netanyahu's belief.
More than Netanyahu, that this is the belief of Lapid and Gantz and all of the potential leaders that might be when Netanyahu gets defeated.
Right. I agree. I just want to tell the audience that I know Jeff, and that is not his personal views. He's just acting as the Prime Minister of Israel. So don't get angry at Jeff. So, Mr. Prime Minister, what line are you would you want us to remove or amend?
Well, the calling all people equal it goes against our basic law of the Jewish right to settle everywhere.
Are you saying that you do not believe that Palestinians and Israelis are equal? You're against that part?
Well, the laws of Israel state that.
Well, is there a law in Israel that says that Israelis are more superior to, or that the Palestinians are superior for that matter?
Well, the basic law says that Jewish people have a right to settle everywhere on the land.
And how is this declaration contradict the law, the declaration of the Jewish people that they can settle everywhere in the land?
We respect the connection of all religions to the next to the last statement, to the land.
So are you denying the connection of other religions to the land?
No.
Let me intervene, perhaps, as Palestinian president, and I also will be called on the substance of this measure. I have one issue that possibly could help my colleague, my Israeli colleague. I find the word equal to be a bit vague. So we could specify it more, like all people are equal before the law, for instance. That would make it more precise and perhaps more acceptable for the Israeli side, because it defines what we're talking about when we say equal. And if we want, I mean, if your parliament has other meanings that it wants to ascribe, feel free to specify it. But so far, I think this wording is a little bit vague. So I would say all people are equal before the law, all religions are equal before God, or whatever we want to say. But at least something that makes it easier, not so vague that then we have to commit to accepting this, then we opens up doors of having to accept all sorts of other stuff in the future. So
the problem
that would in fact make the government of Israel much more comfortable with this. Thank you.
If we say all people are equal before the law?
That would help, and all religions are equal before God. And
okay,
or whatever else, whatever wording we want to find. But I mean, I'm open to suggestions. That
well, how about if we say all people are equal before the law, and all religions are equal to our governments?
Or are equal under the law, or before the law, whatever. Even there, religions can be equal, should be equal before the law. A little bit like the U.S. clause. I forgot what article it is, but whatever, the amendment on religion.
All right. I think we need to move on. The purpose of this is to demonstrate how the Palestinian and the Israeli governments will have no choice but to accept a declaration of peace. They may need to do some acrobatics, but eventually they will have to accept a declaration of peace that will be accepted to both sides. So let's go on to the next issue, and that is, and here we give a veto power to the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. Temporary IPC exclusive jurisdiction over the Gaza Strip. The IPC is the legitimate elected government in the Gaza Strip. The Israeli government was never elected by the people in Gaza. the Palestinian government was not elected by the people in Gaza. The IPC will continue to serve as the federal government for the entire region of Israel and Palestine, retaining exclusive authority in Gaza until a legitimate Palestinian government is elected in Gaza. As you know, the question of who will govern Gaza is front and center right now. So we are proposing that our government, that is the government of the whole area, will be the exclusive government in Gaza until a legitimate Palestinian government will be elected in, and they will have the exclusive jurisdiction over Gaza, but we will also have the jurisdiction based on our federal principle. All legislative, executive, and judicial decisions concerning the Gaza Strip will be made by the entire IPC government in line with this Constitution. Does anyone have any questions regarding this legislation? And the Palestinian government have a veto power. Does anyone have any questions? Paul, do you have any comments regarding this legislation?
I suppose the only comment will be Hamas would claim that it is legitimate because it was elected within Gaza. It may not mean anything, but that is what they would say, and it is a factor which would have to be taken into account.
Yeah, true. Any other comments? Shlomo?
Quick comment. Hamas said that under the right conditions, they will get off the government. They will respect any other government by the Palestinians. So I don't think it's a problem.
Well, also they will have to have their election. We are not in opposition to any legitimate Palestinian government that will be elected. In fact, we will give them a veto power once they are elected.
Yeah.
But right now, someone needs to manage the Gaza Strip. It cannot be Israel because Israel is not elected there. It cannot be the Hamas because they are not elected there. It cannot be any other Palestinian. So we are saying for the time being, it would be the federal government. Let's have a vote. Palestinian parliament members, please vote on this legislation. Do you support this legislation, Palestinian parliament members? We need 55% of the Palestinian parliament members publish the vote. Okay, we got 88% of the Palestinian parliament members supporting this legislation. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Israeli parliament members. Do you support this legislation? Israeli parliament members. Publish the vote. 100% of the Israeli parliament members. And when we speak about the Israeli parliament, we are speaking about the whole area of Israel, Palestine, the same for the Palestinian parliament members. All right, let's go to the President of Palestine. We will refer to you as Mahmoud Abbas. Mr. President of Palestine, are you accepting this legislation?
I have problems with this, with the way this is phrased, because you sort of seem to imply that the Gaza Strip would be ruled by an authority that is different from ours. We claim sovereignty over the whole of the Palestinian territories, including Gaza. So I would say that your point number 4 should be rephrased. The last part should be that retain exclusive authority in Gaza for the IPC, okay, until legitimate or lawful elections, free elections are held in the Palestinian government. But and I interpret this as meaning that once elections are held in Gaza and Gaza has representatives elected representatives, they will be under the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah, no, once the Palestinian government is elected in Gaza, the relationship between the federal government and the Palestinian government would be the exact same relation under the Constitution, which is we give you a veto power on matters that you are indispensable. But right now, you are dispensable on all issues. You have no power whatsoever in the Gaza Strip. We are giving you a veto power, but the veto power is really meaningless because you have no power in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, as long as it's clear that the long-term solution is for all the Palestinian territories to come under the Palestinian Authority.
We are not making that clear because it's up to you. Remember, we see your government and the Israeli government as not supportive of peace, as disruptive of peace, and it will be up to you to create your jurisdiction and your authority. We will give you a veto power only on matters that you are indispensable, that you can prevent us. That's all.
Well,
right
if
now,
you're not willing,
right now you don't have the power to prevent us from doing anything.
yes, but if you're not willing to change the wording to make sure that we are recognized as a lawful authority once elections are taking place, I cannot support this text. It undermines.
All right, let's talk about
our
what is it that you
possibility.
want us to change?
Article 4 at the end, just say instead of a legitimate Palestinian government elected in Gaza, it just say elections are held. As until lawful elections are held in Gaza, because that we assume that those elections will go towards the Palestinian Authority, to asserting Palestinian Authority sovereignty over Gaza. That's the important thing for us.
Okay, so that's no problem until a legitimate election is held in Gaza. No problem for me, at least. So you're not vetoing it if we make those changes?
Absolutely, I can accept that.
Okay, let's go to the Prime Minister of Israel. Mr. Prime Minister, are you going to veto this legislation?
No, we're not. The government of Israel strongly supports this. We're searching for some way of having some legitimate government over Gaza. But there are three issues that are maybe just suggestions. One is that points 2 and 3 don't really help. If they were taken out, they're just rubbing people's noses that they're no good or have no power. And if one object is to get Hamas to release or to move out or to stop having its military active, point 3 isn't going to help get that done. So points 2 and 3 might come out. And the police or the enforcement mechanisms, the IPC might be the government in Gaza, but how will it affect its rulings? How will it govern without some sort of enforcement mechanism?
It would govern in accordance with the Constitution. We have 300 parliament members. We have I am the president of the whole area, including the Gaza Strip. And
but how will it enforce its rules? A government needs some enforcement mechanism within the territory it enforces, and it'd be nice to have some of that spelled out here.
Okay, we are passing progressive legislation, meaning we are creating future legislation. Once the legislation that we pass that affects Gaza and affects your sovereignty, you will be given a veto power. but we cannot commit ahead of time to tell you what legislation we will pass. Once we pass the legislation, you will have a veto power.
Well, it's not that, it's that if.
But regardless, I am delighted that you are not going to veto this legislation, and we're going to give you an example now of what we intend to do in Gaza. And that is, our first example is joint economic zone. And that's our first order of business regarding Gaza, and to create a joint economic zone between Israel and Gaza with the exclusive IPC management and control in cooperation with the existing government, in other words, with the existing of your government, Mr. Prime Minister, that will have a common economy, education, industry, banking, agriculture, sewer, treatment, desalination parks, solar farms, wind power, and green energy, and creating an international and airport and seaport equally accessible to the Israeli and Palestinians. And you are giving a veto power regarding this legislation. Does anyone have any comments or questions regarding this legislation before we go to vote? Shlomo?
If you hear me, I don't know, I don't see the microphone.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. Yeah, the previous slide, the whole thing with Gaza, to be honest, I don't see it at the point. I think it can be, the whole thing can be eliminated since we, the IPC, are going to, from the river to the sea, that include Gaza, that include the West Bank, and etc. So why to focus on Gaza suddenly? It will be Gaza, like any other place, will have representatives in the IPC. And so that's how I thought it's
the reason we do that is in order to facilitate and assure the removal of the Israeli forces from Gaza.
Okay, it just creates more complexity where we have enough. But anyway, it's whatever. I don't care.
All right.
Shlomo, no, just to specify, that previous measure was giving IPC direct rule over Gaza. This is different from the normal operation of the IPC, which would be a confederation which operates along with the local powers by the Palestinians or Israelis, according to the district.
Correct.
So this is direct rule. We are talking about direct rule, and so that's why that measure is perfectly justified. And we have no objection to that as Palestinians.
All right.
The direct rule is by Hamas, and that's how it should continue until we have something else, in my opinion, but that's my opinion.
Okay, well, we could ask the Hamas leaders if they have, Shlomo, you mentioned that Hamas is willing to give the authority
Yes.
over Gaza to another entity. So,
Yeah.
so they could be consulted on that legislation as well. All right, let's go to this joint economic zone. Does anyone have any questions regarding this legislation on joint economic zone? Paul, do you have any comments regarding this legislation?
I think taking it in regard to the previous discussion, we can't tell for sure, but the reality seems to be that if there were elections for the Palestine National Authority in the West Bank and in Gaza, Hamas would probably win overall by a fairly small majority. But that is the way it seems to be going in terms of the limited polling that's being done. That, one assumes, would be pretty disastrous as far as the Israeli parliament was concerned. It is just possible that discussion on the possibilities of joint economic zones would be enough to have some impact which will be positive. But I'm not sure about that. I think the problem is where we are now, Hamas is presenting itself as, bluntly, the victor in the war. It may be a nonsense in a way, but in terms of the fact it still survived, means that it has a legitimacy which is not easy to undermine. So I think, in a sense, the possibility of a joint economic zone, what it does do is look to a longer term future if there could be trust developed, which would be hopefully positive. but you can't be sure about this. We're in very strange times in terms of who would actually vote given open and fair elections.
All right, but our statement that there is no legitimate government in Gaza other than our government, our federal government, is correct. There is no Palestinian or Israeli government that was elected by the people of Gaza. We are the only people who gave the Palestinians in Gaza the right to vote, and they voted for at least 50 parliament members. I am the president of the whole area, including the area of Gaza. Let's take a vote on the joint economic zone. Israeli, Palestinian parliament members, please vote on this legislation. We need 55% of the Palestinian parliament members. Okay, publish the vote. 100% of the Palestinian voted in favor of this legislation. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Israeli parliament members, please vote. Publish the vote. Also 100% of those who voted, but we got more than 55% of the Israeli and the Palestinian parliament members. So this legislation has passed the legislative body of the federal government. Let's go to the president of Palestine. Are you going to veto this legislation, Mr. President?
No, that's acceptable to us.
All right, let's go to the Prime Minister of Israel. Mr. Prime Minister of Israel, are you going to veto this legislation?
The government of Israel supports joint economic zones. We have a good, rich history of them in Judah and Samaria, and we think that one here would benefit everyone just like the other ones do. No veto from Israel.
All right. Let me go back to Paul. Paul, how realistic do you see this in terms of demonstrating the feasibility and the necessity and the likelihood that a federal government would be able to make peace?
I think it is a possible very long-term change. I would not think that the current circumstances in any sense would allow this to happen. There just isn't the economic and social trust on either side in reality. That does not mean that it is not worth putting forward, because we are obviously looking at the possibilities of visions for a very different future in the longer term.
When we spoke in preparation for this simulation, you said that you think it would be 5 years, and not 1 year. I think that it could be 1 year, and I'll tell you why. Because it's not really a matter of 1 year or 5 years. I think it's a matter of having a clear destination. Once the people of Israel and Palestine know that there is a certain date where the election will take place, then everything would be clear, and they will have to make a decision by that time. So whether it's 5 years, or actually, I think 5 years is less likely to make it happen, because they would say, well, 5 years is unrealistic. We're not going to wait 5 years for an election. But if you say 1 year, then there is something to look forward to, and there are people starting to run and announcing their candidacy, and questions are being asked and getting answers. Go ahead, Paul.
Well, I hope you're right. In fact, when we were talking about the 1 year and 5 year, I think that was when we were looking at the whole idea of presenting this and having enough money. I think a figure of 100 million was mentioned as a means to do it, to demonstrate what could be done. I suppose all I would say is I hope you are right, but I fear that you are wrong.
All right. Well, I hope I hope you're wrong, but well, let's see. All right, let's do a post-simulation survey. After participating in this simulation, do you support a common federal government for the people of Israel and Palestine? Have 5 more seconds to vote. Please publish the vote. This time we have 100% voting yes. Last time we had, when we started, we had 10%, in other words, 2 people who represent 10% of the people who voted no. I'm interested, are the people who voted no, did they change their mind or they're just not voting? If you voted no at the beginning and voted yes now, could you please come forward? Tell us who you are. All right, don't hear. Okay, let's go. Now we're going to open to a open discussion and ask poll questions. I would like to ask you if you can discuss whether these assumptions that we spoke about at the beginning are realistic or not. And let's start with Samir, but let me stop sharing and then we can start with Samir.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Hi,
Good-
everybody. All right, well, my thought on the whole thing, I'm gonna just make it in a short comment, that Israel today is like the urine of a camel. And that means it's going backward all the way for the last 60 years. Why I say that? Because actually, 60 years ago, Israel achieved the one democratic state with equal rights for the Palestinians by ending the military rule in Palestine and having the Palestinian equal rights, give them and to vote and whatever. And they called it proper Israel or whatever, Israeli democracy. And since that time, and especially after the 67 war, actually Israel was in decline. And we went through many wars and many failed negotiations, Oslo agreement and Camp David and all of that. All of that, I mean, arriving to the genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza and the destruction of Gaza. So looking at it now and what's happening today, we have Trump's plan, which called for occupying American occupation of Gaza and ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people from Gaza. And the other plan facing Trump is the Arab plan or the Egyptian plan, which is calling for to keep the Palestinians in Gaza and rebuild Gaza with the Palestinians in it. And that will lead gradually to forming a national unity, Palestinian national unity government. That means with the West Bank and Gaza, to lead eventually to a Palestinian state. And that's right now, it's been in meetings and is gonna maybe in 1 or 2 days, all Arab countries, they're having a summit in Cairo and they are gonna vote for that, for the Arab plan in face of Trump's plan. So these are the realities. I don't see anything relating to something else, because as I said, Israel has been in decline toward peace for the last 60 years. And the hope of anything is glim. It's like out of the whole thing because we don't see it.
Samir,
But that-
you're saying that until 1967, Israel was a democracy because it gave the Palestinians
Yes,
within the 1967 border the right to vote,
yes,
and there
yes.
were equal rights. Well,
Yes.
I disagree with you. I don't think it was a democracy until that time, and I'll tell you why. Because Israel expelled the Palestinians from that land. So you cannot have a democracy by saying, well, I'm going to expel my potential voters in order to vote for, so that I have a higher likelihood that they will vote for a Jewish government. So it's true that the Palestinians that remained in 1967 had the right to vote. But the problem is that 750,000 of those of the Palestinians in that area were expelled. So it's not really a true democracy when you expel your voters, your potential voters, and say, well, I'm just going to keep those that I like and have them vote the way and give them a limited option.
Well, I can argue with that when they expelled the Palestinian, that happened in 1948. And we're
47
talking
and
about
48, right.
Yes. And we're talking about 1965, 1966, when Israel ended the occupation or the military rule of Palestine and made them equal rights. I gave them equal rights. And so there is, like an 18 years different. So actually they did not, it's like, you're saying it happened at the same time. No, it did not happen at the same time. It took 18 years until Israel realized that military occupation is not going to work and ended it and turned it. So what I'm saying that whatever they did, it was correct. And they should have copied it after 1967. That's what I'm saying.
All right,
Maybe
let's go.
It was not a perfect democracy, but definitely better than the situation after 1967, because that proved that all the Israeli leaders were damn stupid. They could not even copy what they did before 1967. That's what I mean.
Okay.
All
Paul,
right.
do you have comments regarding Samir's comments?
I can see where it's coming from, but I would agree generally with you. I think if you take a very broad look at it, I think one of the things we have to accept is there have been a number of periods in the history of the last 50, 60 years where Israel has moved away from a more progressive stance. One obviously was in the early 1990s, because you had the best part of 1 million people coming mainly from Eastern Europe and parts of Russia. And in a sense, they were desperate to have security, and they tended to take security even stronger than the average Israeli. As a result, there's a sort of a move, if you like, you can call it to the right, but to the less progressive. I think there's inevitably a huge shock among Jews in Israel at the second intifada, less the first intifada, much more the second intifada, because of the bombs and all the things that happened in Tel Aviv and elsewhere. So those are two examples where I think Israel has become a less progressive country. So to that extent, I would agree with where Samir is coming from. That doesn't mean it has to be like that in the future, but for the moment at least, I think it is. And obviously, since the 7th of October, that has been even more difficult. The other point which I'm tending to pick up from Palestinian sources is that Palestinians, wherever they are putting much more emphasis on what is happening in the West Bank at present, because many of them now fear that what the current Israeli government is about doing is to make life so difficult for Palestinians in the occupied territories that more and more of them will actually cross the Jordan into Jordan itself. Now, whether that is fair or not, I don't know, but that is certainly a very strong feeling. Although I understand it's hardly being reported in the local Israeli press, the extent of the deaths and injuries and dispossessions that are happening in the West Bank, it's not at the level of Gaza, but it's certainly heading to some extent in that direction. So I think we are in a particularly difficult time now, partly because of the nature of the current government in Jerusalem.
Let's go to Sean and then Shlomo. Sean.
Hi, Joseph. How are you?
Good. How are you, Sean?
I'm okay. Can you hear me better?
No, we don't hear you very well. You need to improve your speaker.
Oh boy. I'll try to say something.
Okay, go ahead.
I can hear him. I can hear him.
Okay. Yeah. According to what Sabir was saying about the expulsion of the Palestinian in 1948, you know what? Israel, like that time when they expelled the Palestinian from their home, you know, Israel should have done another approach, because when they were going to form their country, they were supposed to go to these Palestinians and tell them that your country is going to be changed to Israel. You have a choice. You want to stay or you want to leave. And then they decide if they want to stay or leave. They don't face the expulsion. This was the wrong thing. This was supposed to be that Israel's supposed to propose it to them and tell them, this is the country. You have a choice. You want to stay or leave. This is what they should have done. Right. And
that's true.
Anyhow, and you know, I want to mention the Arabs that are living in Israel, not the one in the West Bank or Gaza. The you know the Druze people, the Druze.
The Druze.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Druze.
Yeah, the Druze. They serve in the IDF. They serve in the Israeli military. But some of these Druze are just complaining that they're not getting the same like their neighbor Israeli, like their neighbor Jew. They're not getting electricity. They're not getting water supply. They're not getting the same equal rights that their Jewish brothers who served in the IDF.
Yeah, they're not getting
equal
treatment.
Even the ones serving the IDF, they're not getting equal rights. They're not getting that's what the so. And then I'm hearing them on the news about it. They're just complaining about it. And then I remember one lady was mentioning about how she was a non-Jewish in Israel, and she told me about how she can vote and everything, and there's nothing wrong with her voting. But she's been saying on the political level she's okay, but only when on the social level she's facing discrimination. The entity level, she's okay, but when it comes to the social, she's just completely facing discrimination, and nobody likes to hire non-Jews in the factory or work for somebody. This is what she was mentioning to me about the things that she was going through. Yeah, can you address this, Joseph, if you want to?
No question about it. The Jewish democracy is bad for everyone, including the Jews. It cannot treat everyone as equal. Just have to be democracy, not Jewish democracy.
You know what? The other thing before I go, what I was gonna say, are you getting any emails concerning the IPC? That there's these Zionist watchdog and watching people saying anything critical of Israel, that they will send you a note and telling you that you are making anti-Semitic remarks, and that we will shut down your activity, because already in colleges in America that people are protesting.
Are you asking me if I am getting those?
Yes, because like those students in college are protesting against the war in Gaza, what Israel's doing, and now the government is making a law now where you cannot go and protest against Israel, because criticizing or protesting against Israel is considered anti-Semitic, and they will bring police and they will arrest you from the premises if you go and protest or criticize Israel. So I'm seeing that because there's a high volume of criticism for Israel, like and the lobby or don't like it, they're going to try to force the government and tell the government to make a law to not let people say what they want to say about Israel. So I'm thinking we criticize Israel and the Palestinians at the same time, but we have those watchdogs watching you and sending you some letters. Like even people who are on social media have been receiving like notes saying that you are making anti-Semitic remarks. We are going to shut down your account, something like that. All for the sake, all for the purpose of criticizing Israel, rather Israel's doing something good or bad.
Sean, I don't know if you were here at the beginning, but I said that these people they have a dangerous ideology. They created that ideology. That ideology, together with the weapon industry, was merged and became the most dangerous combination of ideologies. They decide whether someone else is anti-Semitic or not. They just took it upon themselves to have the right to make that decision. They are the most dangerous people, those that have the dangerous ideologies that have no peace, no vision for peace, that believe in weapons and believe in constant wars. They are the most dangerous people to the Jewish people and the Palestinian people. And in order to hide that, they accuse other people of being anti-Semitic, but they are the danger. They are the danger to the Jewish people, the Israeli people, and the Palestinian people, because they use dangerous ideology in combination with dangerous weapons, and they have no vision for peace.
Can I say something to that? That the creation of Israel was a mistake in 1948, and it should have been one democratic state from that time, by just letting the Palestinians live with them, Palestinians and Israeli, and Jews live together, and that would have been fine. But it seems to me like in 1948, that was the biggest mistake maybe the Jews made by creating this.
Yeah, by creating a Jewish state, they created a trajectory of a religious
Zionist state. It is not just a Jewish. It is a Zionist state which denies the Palestinians the rights to live on the land, and that was the biggest mistake to begin with. All right.
And what we are trying we're trying to correct that. And we're trying to correct that by creating a federal government for the whole area of Israel and Palestine that would be equal to the Palestinians and the Israelis, something that should have been created in 1947 and 1948. Let's go to Shlomo. Hi, Shlomo. And by the way, Paul, anytime you want to make comments.
Yeah, to Samir and everything, the problem was demography. Of course, this is why they didn't do the same in 1967, because then you have almost majority of Palestinians and there is no Jewish state. Then the real question is whether Zionism was a good idea, and because Zionism as a Jewish state, it was a bad idea because of two reasons. First of all, Jewish state is not a good idea in general. Now, Jewish state in a place where you have another people was even more crazy, because what do you do with the people there if you want just a Jewish state? So that's the problem with Zionism in general. Maybe there should be another Zionism, and there was another Zionism of more moderate and intellectual Jews who said, just live together, as you said, Samir, and make a democracy with them, and But this didn't happen. They were marginalized. Okay, so question to Paul, two questions. First, are you aware of the DM25, the one that with Yanis Varoufakis in Europe? And if so, do you see any similarity or difference between what we are trying to do here in the IPC and DM25? That's one question. And the other question to you is, how do you view if if we take IPC aside, what is your vision of peace in the Middle East right now?
The first one, JN25, I didn't quite get what that is about.
Oh, okay. So that's like a government. It's like very much like the IPC. I'm surprised that Yanis Varoufakis didn't see it, but
yeah,
because it's they make a government for Europe, which is independent of all the European Union and definitely NATO and all of that. And look it up. Yanis Varoufakis, are you aware? Do you know him? He was the finance minister and yeah in Greece, and he's a fantastic economist and thinker. And then he took James Corbyn is also on the DM, and some other major figures. Anyway, something to look into and just
I am aware of it, but it's not something I've looked into any detail. I mean, I think the interesting experience in Europe is the very, very slow but steady transition to peace in Northern Ireland. That is one which I think has many lessons. It's been going on for 25 years and we're still not out of the wood by a long shot, but there has been progress made. And it's interesting that with time in Northern Ireland, the Alliance Party, which is the one which is non-factional in terms of religion, is slowly gaining ground. And that is becoming more significant in Northern Ireland politics. But it's reckoned, I mean, many of our students go to work in peace building, and it's reckoned that, you know, a conflict such as Northern Ireland, you will not get a lasting peace within 50 years. But it is on that path to peace, which is important. Sorry, what was your second question, Shlomo?
So what?
Oh, yes,
regardless
of I think one thing which is worth remembering is the role of the United States. And we tend to see modern Zionism stemming really from the 1890s and Theodor Herzl and the movement then. I think we should be looking more at the 1820s, because it was in the 1820s that you actually had the development of Christian Zionism. Particularly with the work that was done at Trinity College Dublin. And I think one tends to forget that in the United States as a whole, which as we know is one of the world's more religious countries, you have about 100 million evangelical Christians. Of them, probably about 30 million are convinced Christian Zionists who believe absolutely that Israel is part of God's plan for the end days. That, I think, is an area where many people who study the region don't actually remember that, because it's very important in American voting politics, far more so, I think, than is realized in the United States. So, but in terms of your question, well, I think the problem is that Israel, in terms of Jewish Israel, is less secure than it has been for many years. As a result of the 7th of October, and we have to face up to that and start from that. And it's going to be very difficult it's going to be more difficult to build a lasting peace because of that. On the other hand, and where I think Joseph is coming from, we're in a position where it is possible to say that the position is extremely dangerous, and that there has to be some other way. I mean, I agree fully with what you're trying to do. There has to be another way. And I think we have to remember that the destruction of Gaza has been really pretty extraordinary. In terms of the weapons dropped, it's roughly equivalent to 7 Hiroshima bombs, but spread over the entire territory. So we have a major problem there. But at the same time, I think this is where you actually need people to be able to say there are other ways forward and there are other possibilities. It's even more important to be saying that at present than at any time in the last several decades. So this is why I think this kind of exercise is a necessary one, because it opens up other possibilities and other thinking. And as you say early on, there is no alternative to this, because the feared alternative is in fact the ethnic cleansing of not just Gaza, but much of the occupied West Bank, which is certainly people within the Israeli government would actually favor. And that would be utterly disaster. But when you have somebody like Trump in the White House, then anything is up for grabs. And I think this is the difficulty we're in at the present time. It's a very dangerous time at present, in my view. Sorry to be so pessimistic.
Let's go to Heather.
Not Samir first?
Samir already spoke.
Okay. What Sean brought up, I have also seen that there are cases being brought sometimes in regard to comments certain very outspoken people on social media are making. For instance, Yves Engler in Montreal was arrested, but you know, it's as though they're being targeted. But I think what Sean is saying is keep an eye out, because what they seem to be doing is targeting people in an effort to wear them down and have charges brought against them, and you scare people. But it's pretty serious. And then in addition, in some of the talks I think were taking place in Germany with some of the DiEM25 people, and Francesca Albanese were shut down. There are other media / activists who have been arrested in Europe as well. So they're kind of getting serious. So just maybe look into it and be aware. DiEM25 is a transnational movement for democracy, and they have a lot of different ways to get involved. It's very people-powered, grassroots in a sense, but anyone can join from anywhere in the world, and they have collectives for peace, for transparency, and other groups. But everyone can get involved to the extent they want to and help write policy, and then that in turn informs. They have a political party called MIRA, M-E-R-A, that is actually running for office in Europe. So it is an interesting model and worth looking into. And there is a Palestine subgroup of the Peace Collective.
What's the name of it?
M-E-R-A, MIRA. And then
MIRA.
DiEM25 is the transnational movement that informs MIRA.
Heather, who are you with?
I'm just Heather, live in Washington State. I did I have joined some of the DiEM25 meetings to see what they're doing, because there's, other than Jill Stein and a few other folks who are trying to fix politics. I mean, I've spent a little time locally here trying to address the politics locally, state, and nationwide, and it's just a quagmire. So we have to look to other models to kind of get some fresh ideas and just keep pushing. But I'm just an individual. I live in Washington State.
I can tell you that my experience is that the issue of Israel-Palestine is really being used worldwide, including in America, for the purpose of internal politics. It's not really for the purpose of helping or resolving or making peace in Israel-Palestine. Because I find it hard to believe that, focusing on America and Canada and Europe, the people who believe in a federal government for themselves, if they truly wanted peace in Israel-Palestine, they would have suggested that formula to Israel-Palestine.
Right.
But they don't do that. And that is a huge question. Why are they supporting it for themselves and not supporting it for Israel-Palestine? Why are they in favor of separation between religion and government for themselves, but not for Israel-Palestine?
Because
and
they
in
don't,
my opinion is, I'm sorry?
Because they don't represent the people. They represent their interests, self-interest, and because the Zionist lobby, whether it is Christian Zionist or Jewish Zionist, is very strong and has a lot of money. AIPAC and others.
That's right.
No, it's also the Christian, the fundamentalist, evangelist, yeah. So they have a lot of money, and that money now, elections in the United States, there is no democracy. It is oligarchy with elections based on money. And so whoever has more money can get elected. And those who don't agree with AIPAC or with any, they will put money on the other side, and the opposite side, and as they.
Yeah, but Shlomo, you're not answering my question.
I think
You
got
you
He probably can't hear you. He's
And
frozen.
all of the game.
Frozen.
okay. My question is this: why do people in America, in Europe, who live under a federal government, who swear allegiance to a federal government, why is it that they feel so comfortable in proposing a system of government that they actually oppose, that they actually feel is inferior system of government, but they propose that for Israel Palestine, claiming to be supporters of Israel Palestine? And I'll to give you the answer. The answer is internal politics. They don't really care about Israel Palestine. They care about themselves in America, in Canada, in Europe, and they are happy with the limited discussion relating to Israel Palestine. It serves their political agenda.
Yeah, nothing new under the sun.
If it doesn't add up, I would call it ulterior motives for sure, of some sort or other.
Yeah. All right.
Well, they are looking down at the people as they are third world
Exactly.
countries, and
Exactly. They're looking down upon us as people. That's why I said that if we have a federal government elected with a majority, with with a constitution, it would be a momentous occasion. It's an occasion that they would never really, they don't really think is applicable to Israel Palestine. They don't really think that the Israelis and the Palestinians are able, capable of living in peace under a democracy, under a constitution. They feel that a democracy and constitution is good for them, but not for the people of Israel and Palestine. I refer to it as many times as a rooster fight. What is it called? Rooster fight. A chicken fight. You know, the people of Israel and Palestine are the roosters. They're fighting each other, and there are people that are making the money. There are people that are gambling, serving alcohol, and basically using those roosters to fight each other for their own purposes. That's what the people in Israel Palestine are. They are the roosters fighting each other, and people all over the world are benefiting from that, politically, economically, and this is accepted. And what we are trying to say is, no, we are normal people just like you, and we deserve peace. We don't deserve to be the roosters fighting for you, for your own political and economical purposes.
Yeah, that's on all scale, by the way. The Netanyahu sent the chicken to fight in Gaza against Hamas. So he benefits from it, and his gang. So it's on all scales. Yeah.
Okay. So let me make closing remarks, and then we'll go to Heather again, if necessary. I don't know if you raise your hand or still remaining, and then we'll go to Paul for closing remark. We believe that a common democratic confederation can bring peace. It can be elected. Online elections is feasible. 1 week of war between Israel and Gaza cost billions of dollars. I don't even think that the number 3 is accurate here. It's a lot more. The current governments in Israel and Palestine are not legitimate governments, and the only solution is to create a democracy that includes the people of Israel and Palestine together, because they deserve peace and they deserve to live normal life like the rest of us. So let me stop sharing. We'll go to whoever wants to make closing remark. Heather, do you want to make closing remarks?
I just wanted to ask Paul if in your career experience, you know, there are discussions about how both Palestinians, Gaza, and Ukraine has been used as a place for experimentations and R&D for AI warfare and so forth. So, you know, what Yosef was just discussing kind of brought that to mind when you have a different set of circumstances and standards for one country over another. You know, they're not getting a system of governance, and they seem to be used for a different purpose. But do you have knowledge or experience of how Gazans may be being used as a place for research and development of certain types of warfare?
Yes, certainly. It's certainly happening in Ukraine, incidentally. There have been huge developments on the drone side in particular, both by Ukraine and also by countries that are working with Russia. But as far as Gaza is concerned, absolutely. The key book on this was published, I think, barely 2 years ago by the Jewish investigative reporter Anthony Lowenstein, who's an Australian. And it's called simply The Palestine Laboratory. And it's all about the way in which Gaza has been used, and indeed, to some extent, the occupied West Bank. I've just been involved in co-editing a book called The Monstrous Anger of the Guns, which is about the world international arms trade. And that actually has an introduction by the British politician Jeremy Corbyn, and it's been sponsored by his outfit, which is called the Peace and Justice Project. I'm an advisor to that. And essentially, we have a short chapter from Anthony Lowenstein in that book. And it's certainly, he basically opens up what is happening, but his full book, which is very well researched, a huge number of references, is worth read. I think it's the best source going at the present time. But Israel has been very clever in terms of its own defense industries in developing and testing weapon systems on local populations in many different ways, not least now in AI, I have to say. More generally, I mean, I think the closing remarks, as I said at the start, that I'm sure that this kind of exercise is hugely worthwhile. I agree very much with what Joseph was saying, and what one or two other people have used, maybe others have used it, is we are moving into a very unusual circumstance, at least in the last 100 years, of a rapid rise of an oligarchy. It's an oligarchic society. You know, we have this, I think your Senator Bernie Sanders just reminded us last week that the 3 richest people in the United States have the collective wealth of the poorest half of the entire country. That is the extent
of the entire world.
Yeah, well, getting on for that way, but essentially, you know, we now have 3,500 billionaires. We're probably going to get at least 3 trillionaires within the next decade. The concentration is actually speeding up, but that has huge political implications. But it's something, I think the main thing is we have to be aware of it. Incidentally, I think it's an area which is not well known even now. The extent of the way in which socioeconomic divisions are developed isn't really in the common mind in most parts of the world. Not all of them, but in most of them. I think that's one thing we badly need to try and address more.
Yeah, it's good.
All right. Okay, we're going to conclude now. I want to thank all of you for participating. I want to thank Paul for your generosity and your time to speaking to us and engage with our ideas and with such an open mind. Thank you so much, and I thank all of you, and hopefully we'll see you in the next simulation.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.